So we make molds in several different levels. We found it's more efficient for us to focus our mold making capability, which I'll show you in a little bit, on the engineering cycle. And then when it gets to the point where we are building some quantity of product, we'll send out, because we have good shops in Taiwan that we use for production molds, because they consume a huge amount of resource to build production tools. So if you look at molds like this, for example, these are very complex. I'll show you one mold that's pulled open in the shop, but each time you're making a mold, it's like a custom V8 engine.
Wow.
Very complex. A lot of work goes into this, and so we send production mold like this to outside sources so that I can preserve my internal resources for building engineering and prototype molds. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a bit. So I mentioned complexity of a mold. This mold is very involved. It makes two shots at a time, two parts at a time, and it's basically shaped like a gun. A plastic instrument is used in surgery. This is what it takes to make those components in production.
Wow. And I'm sorry, Jeff, you guys built this mold here, or is
this one we had done in Taiwan?
Taiwan, just the labor, and so kind of designed it here, tested prototype here, and then for large scale manufacturing, for hours spent, sent it to Taiwan.
Correct.
Then they send it back here.
We can do all this stuff.
Yeah, but why would you pay for that?
For me to use my more expensive resources here and limited resources, it would take my shop a month to build this or more.
Yeah.
But if I go to Taiwan, yes, they're going to take
a month.
a while to build it.
Yeah.
But because we've already done the prototyping and so on, I can then put my team back on doing the next project while this is being, because there's got to be 500,000 mold makers in Taiwan.
Yeah, we're paying for your brains and then not your brawn, and we're using the brawn where it's cheaper.
But to get this mold made, this mold probably took 3 months to get it here from Taiwan.
Wow.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's like building a custom V8 engine.
What is it originally?
I've been doing this for a long time, and I was always keen on cutting that lead time to get molds made sooner. So everywhere I've been, I had injection molding, because I've been in the startup industry. I've been with several startups prior to starting this 20 years ago. And I'm always looking at a way to get a mold faster. So what we've been doing, and others are doing this also, I didn't originate this, but making a mold like this that we 3D print in plastic allows us to shoot 20 or 50 or 100 parts and then throw the mold away. And that is a mold that can be grown, 3D printed overnight.
And sorry, so how much would, if you guys wanted to print a mold so I could get materials that we couldn't 3D print in, how much would that cost to print that mold? In plastic?
We typically do, because it includes the engineering cycle as well, but typically like $2,500.
Wow.
This process has limitations on what materials you can do and the complexity of a component. Because these molds don't hold up, they shatter and they're plastic. But we can print in metal. So for example, this is a printed mold insert, and I'll show you an example of what I mean by mold insert in a minute. So this was printed, this was printed, this is printed, and we can print inserts in metal as well as the plastic, depending on the requirement, with different levels of tooling depending on your budget and your timing and the technical demands of the mold. We've got 5 different ways to make a mold. So the process for making molds, we can grow molds. We can also manufacture them in the traditional sense. We got CNC machines. CNC is computer numerical control. We can take the part as designed. The mold makers actually design the mold.
Wow.
So they do it from soup to nuts. They design the mold and build the mold. So back to the accountability. They are accountable for making their molds that work.
Sure.
And then the engineer right there with them. So they will design the mold, machine the components that go into making this mold, and part of that process requires this machine. So
we
this is called an EDM machine. That's electrical discharge
getting
machining.
close?
Oh, you can, just don't inhale this. So this is what's called, like I said, electrical discharge machining, EDM. The way this works is sometimes there are shapes that you can't cut in a traditional machining operation. So what we do is we then machine an electrode. The electrodes are sometimes made in graphite and sometimes in copper. And we'll make the reverse of the shape for the mold. And then this burns with a high frequency discharge. It's like zillions of lightning bolts eroding the metal out of the mold to create a feature in a mold that we can't cut. And so you actually hear that thing and you see the sparking taking place. And those are the zillions of little lightning bolts. Every one of those is creating a particle of eroded metal, which is then just flushing out with the fluid. And so the end result is a shape that we just couldn't have manufactured through other processes. So again, this is really a critical space, and so all of our tool makers we've actually trained up in-house. And so I can take a young guy who's mechanically inclined, who grew up with a computer, train them to be a mold maker